So it's better to start now.
Okay.
Can everyone hear my voice clearly? Because we're going to talk so much at the program. Okay, thank you very
Yes.
much. Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon, good evening for some of the people, of course. Mr. Santodirocco, dear friends, everyone, hi. At Istanbul Gelish University Aviation Club, we welcome you all for this program. My name is Khala Jamal Ali. I'll be your moderator. I am an aviation management fourth-year student, and we keep going to our events with the human factors in aviation, with a special emphasis on training. And this workshop with our respected Claudio Santodirocco, Ryanair's first air. Thank you very much for coming. We welcome you, sir. We would like to thank you in advance for the presentation and for your experiences you're going to give at this program. Thank you very much. And now I'll leave the stage for you, sir, and then you can have your presentation.
Thank you so much for having me once again here in this channel with you guys. I'm honored to be part of this series of webinar and to have chance to talk with aviation professionals and students, especially. This is where I like to be, between students, because we all are students for the majority of our life in so much of a complicated industry and fascinating like aviation. So as stated, I am, thank you, Kaula. I am Claudio Santodirocco from Italy. I am at the moment working in Canary Islands, based with a famous low-cost career in Europe. I am a first officer with roughly 3,000 hours on the machine, and I am also a flight instructor with around about 2,000 hours in teaching. My expertise has his roots mainly in training, because I've been in flight instruction, I've been in ATC training department in the south of Spain as well. So this is where I belong again. This is where I like to be. Okay, so today I would like to continue the discourse that we had back, what was that, on the 1st of April, about human factors in aviation, CRM. This is what I was talking about the other time. This time, my emphasis will be on the human factor itself. So we shifted our focus from the CRM, so the crew resource management, to the in much more detail on the human factor. Don't be scared. I'm not going to be in so much of a detail, in the sense that I would like to speak only 20 minutes on the technicalities, on what we're talking about, what we are going to see, where you guys should be looking at when you want to go through this specific topic. So I prepared a small presentation, and most importantly for everybody is I was working hard on the references, so you guys can have exactly the sources of information you want to look at when you look at when you want to make yourself more aware on what we are talking about. Either if you are in the aviation industry, or if you want to join the aviation industry, if you are a pilot, if you want to be a pilot, or if you are, as Kaula, for example, an expert in management, the human factor is crucial. Okay, so I will go ahead and start on this topic, hopefully giving some insights, ideas, and then feedback from you guys. And I will try to share some of the experience connected to that, because believe me, the human factor again is the funniest part of aviation in many senses. Okay, So I will now switch the screen in my to my presentation. So let's see if I can. Can you see it?
Yes, sir. We can.
Okay, cool. So, so my webinar title is the same. So it's a brief introduction on the principle and the idea behind the most important revolution in modern aviation. So we are here at this point in history when artificial intelligence, which is, I know, is a topic that you guys like, is rising, a rising factor in many of our part of our life. But in aviation, it is still very important to analyze the human factor. The emphasis today, as I said before, is on the training, because this is where I know the most, and this is where I think you guys are going to be more interested, because I'm told that you guys are mostly young people who are in the industry or coming in. So I think I can be more effective if I can give you some insights and I can answer questions of any kind when it comes from to the training part of aviation. Okay. So, okay, this is a model which I like because it's now very common and is used in order to teach what it means to be a human person, obviously, in a such a technological environment like an aircraft. Okay, so they have developed this model, okay, which tries to describe in quite an objective way what are the main constituent part of the human factor. So they divide the environment in software, hardware, environment, and liveware. And the interrelationship between these aspects. Now, I will try to go and describe a little bit what they mean, and I'm going to give us some examples. Okay, so the software is not only what you might think is the software, like computer software. Okay, software means basically your checklists. Okay, the computer you're using, obviously, in the cockpit, in the form of an iPad, for example, like with the electronic flight bag, your charts, the manuals that you're going to use. So everything which from which you extract information and which you have to deal in order to solve a specific situation. Typically, the QRH, for example, quick reference handbook, is a book. So next time, if you want, I will try to bring one, so I'll show you how it is. What is a Boeing 737 like big thick QRH? So the software is where you extract information from. Okay. The hardware instead is the systems itself. So the airplane itself, the navigation equipment, from the engine all the way to the cockpit. Okay, including how the design of those parts bring the result all together. Okay, so forms the aircraft all together. So the hardware, actually the hardware means the thing that you can touch. Okay, and then you have the environment. The environment is everything which has to do in the with where you are immersed in. Okay, so the environment can be the weather, can be outside the aircraft, the temperature inside the aircraft, the humidity. Okay, being a human being means that you have to deal with the fact that you are a living creature, so to speak, if you pass me the term, in a bullet that flies 600 800 kilometers per hour, pressurized through the air into space, basically, because we fly well above the tropopause. So this is what you are. Okay, you're a piece of meat that flies in a bullet in the space. This is what you are when you have to manage to bring the plane from A to B. If you're a pilot, if you're a cabin crew, then you have to take care of all the others that are involved in that trip. Okay, so this is nothing less than that. So this is the environment in which you are in. Then they call the word liveware in order to mean all the factors that affect you as a human being as well, such as fatigue, stress, your training level, your knowledge, your performance that specific day, trying to perform a specific task in a specific moment. Okay, obviously, your let's say the main challenge is to make sure that all these elements somehow get together to accommodate the human being in making the best choices. You might have, for sure, it might happen to you when you work or when you study, that at a certain day you perform the same task with a big difference in performance, and then you wonder why. So the first thing you do is you have to think about the condition in which you are performing a certain task. Not to mention when you have to fly an airplane, meaning that, again, you have to manage a certain amount of energy, a big machine, and you have to do it in that certain environment. So this is you dealing with the environment. And then they also say, they use another L to describe the liveware interfaces. So again, when we talk about the performance of a human being in that specific environment which I described, you have to make sure you understand how important it is, for example, a certain interface from the machine to you. Okay, when you extract information from a manual, for example, it is do you think is the same when you try to get an information from an iPad rather than a book, like maybe a thick book like that? Or if your display in front of you is designed correctly, so it gives you the exact information when you want it, the way you understand it better. So all this design is super important in order to understand how you will perform that certain task. So when it comes all together, the interaction between these elements make your performance. Okay, obviously you don't realize. When I go and fly, I don't think about the shell model, and I'm not thinking, well, let me see if the I'm not thinking about how the elements, for example, of my navigation display or my main display in front of me, or the checklist look like. I deal with it. So when you deal with it, you make your best, obviously. And then you see that when you're dealing with a certain, for example, stressing emergency situation, which I haven't had in my airline pilot career, but I certainly had in the sim, then you realize that you start appreciating how everybody in the aviation industry have put an effort in order to make all these elements come together for a better safety. So this is what it means. But then we'll see, if you want later, we can go in more detail. You can ask more stuff. I try to make examples. But for the moment, this is what the idea is. The factors that interfere with your performance are so many, and they can be described in this model. So, as I said the last time, and it's pretty unfortunate to say that the human error is by far, especially by far, the primary contributor to accidents. And all the investigation have led to that conclusion. And unfortunately, like always in aviation, all the improvements have made out of blood, so they say, meaning that accidents and proper investigation have led to a continuous improve in design, on technology, on procedures, manuals, iPads, navigation equipment, in order to serve better the human being, because they realize that the human being is the one that fails, unfortunately. It's that simple, really. So the human part is the most vulnerable, but also the most surprising. So the human being is the one that can really can be responsible of a certain accident, but they can also save everybody's life. This is why we're there as pilots. So you as a pilot or an operator, because I'm talking about also the ATC mostly, right? So everybody who's involved in a certain flight, so to speak, so in a certain situation in which you have to manage the, as a first person, so as a pilot, the operation of an aircraft, you are responsible to make sure that the relationship between you and the operation is safe. In other words, you are the one responsible to make sure you can minimize the risks. Well, I once read in an old Cessna 152, I think, manual, that it was specifically stated that the aircraft was designed in order to prioritize safety against or at the expenses of the comfort. That I was still in training myself, and that's a statement in the manual, in the AFM, in the aircraft flight manual of the airplane, struck me, because it was clear that the designer and the engineer said, hey, I have made everything I could in order to make you comfortable in the plane, but my first concern was still safety. Okay, so this is due to the fact that an engineer that designs a small aircraft has to deal with certain limitations, right? But still we're humans. So we have two legs, we have two arms, we are different in size, and it's not a small challenge for designers. So when I sit with with students, and I'm an instructor, in the very first lessons, not even the first, even later, I always stress the concept that comfort is something that the designer of the airplane didn't think about as a priority. So you have to look for the best comfort in that environment. And I'm talking about, as it says here, cockpit design. I'm talking about the seat, the seat back, the harnesses, your sight. So the environment is not comfortable. You have to adapt yourself to be as much as comfortable as you can. Any of you who had traveled a long travel with a car know the difference between traveling in a big luxury car or in a small Panda car, right? So it makes a huge difference at the end. When you get a destination, you realize how more tired you are. And this is a factor that when you drive a car is something that you can take in account. But when you fly an aeroplane, your comfort is crucial to perform. Again, nowadays with modern aviation, we are trying to improve it. But believe me, the great majority of the airplane out there are still prioritizing safety over comfort of the pilot. So I put this here as well because the importance of the CRM is embedded in the human factor. Although the resources, as I said the last time, the resources that we're talking about when we talk about crew resource management are not related solely on the performance of the person, but when we talk about CRM, we talk about how to be a team. Okay, so it's a slightly different concept, although it's in the same niche. So we're talking about how to pass me the term, extract the best of every crew member. Okay, but then is responsible of every and each crew member to make sure that they can perform at their best, knowing their relationship between the way they feel and the environment in which they're operating. That specific day. Now, everybody as well, when they're about to perform an important and demanding task, they have to make sure that they are at their best shape. And believe me that sleeping is possibly one of the most important part of our life. So this is in normal condition. Now, if you work in aviation, you know that unfortunately you are not always, due to operational reasons, you're not always able to make a good night's sleep, especially because sometimes when, for example, I'm on earlies, I have to wake up at 3 in the morning. Now, my body doesn't want to wake up at 3 in the morning. So I have to know that, because I have to make sure that I can put myself in the condition to get the best out the poor sleep night I'm going to have the day before my duty, so that when I come on the plane, although I couldn't have a normal, maybe a nice 8-hour sleep, but I can still have the best performance I can use that day. So I make sure I rest. Okay, even in condition in which normally you wouldn't rest properly. Unfortunately, this is what happens when you work in shifts. Then you have night pilots, night operating pilots, people that they have to sleep in during the day. So sleep and in general our circadian rhythm, so they called, so the rhythm that we undergo, all of us, between day and night, sleep and awake time. This is something that is crucial. Everybody in aviation know that. And it's again solely on the responsibility of the pilot. The concept of fatigue is something that I haven't talked about. So the fatigue, what's fatigue? Lately, in the last few years, I have to say, I've seen my company increasing the emphasis on the fatigue management. So one thing is to be tired. Okay, so you're tired after a good long day working. So you went to work, nice and rested, and then you work a very long day, nice long day, nice flight, maybe 4 flights. You deal with all the situation, passengers, weather. Nice. You go home, and then you go home tired, and then you might not be able to sleep properly. So the next day, you go to work, you haven't rested properly, so your performance now decreases. Sometimes even without you knowing completely. So you go to work and you perform slightly less. You don't even realize. Next day again, the same. Then you accumulate a little bit of more stress due to the fact that you're tired or due to any situation that might have happened during the day. The result of this continuous lack of proper rest makes that you get to a point, a certain day, in which your performance drops. Sometimes not even realizing fully. So it happened to me, you're about to do something and your brain just doesn't want to cooperate with you. Okay. The fatigue is when you get to that point. So it's normally a result of many cycles, not completed cycles of sleep and rest, rest and work. And so you, without realizing, have a drop in performance, even dangerous, a drop in performance. Now, this is in normal condition. Now, if you think about a situation in which, for example, you had to undergo a very difficult exam with university, you had to study a lot of time, and then you get you being tired and the stress of the exam or the stress of the duty. It happens that all the external factors that they look like they are external to you, so your family situation, your personal stress, any kind of financial problems, any problem in general, affect your performance so that your fatigue increases. So you get to a point in which you make a fatal mistake. This is what fatigue is. So this is why airline companies are very attentive to this. So you don't have to get to the point in which you're fatigued. If you feel like you're fatigued, you have to report it. And they will make sure that you get proper rest. Recovering from fatigue is something that, if you want, we can talk about later. So what it is, how to recognize, what to do. It's not something easy. It's something I learned to manage with time, because it has a lot to do on how you know yourself as a person. So if you want later, we can talk about this. So the training, the role of training in human factors is obviously crucial. They have developed plenty of trainings in order to make sure you understand your own resources and you make sure you can report your fatigue and you know how to recognize the signs of fatigue. And proper good training is also focused on how to advocate for it and make sure the other members of the team, they know you're undergoing a certain problem and situation so that you can still be a part of a team, for example, in duty, during a day of duty. If you feel like you're having fatigue, for example, or stress, you have to advocate, making sure the other know and make sure that they can cooperate with you, making up for the part that you cannot cope with. This is very, very common. It happened to me as a pilot, not as a cabin crew, but as a pilot, it happened a lot. ATC is a part that we tend not to include in our duty day because we don't see them. But ATC operators are also submitted to an enormous amount of stress and fatigue. So they also receive a specific training when it comes to the management of their own state of mind and state of body. Again, it comes up to the responsibility of the single person, but the training makes a huge role into recognizing the signs of fatigue, even for them. So the automation and the human factor is something that we have talked about the last time, and I wanted just to add one thing about this. The autopilot doesn't make up from you being fatigued or you being unable to comply with your duty. So the automation is in any instance going to supply for the pilot. It's very important. The automation and the autopilot, for example, is there in order to help you release some workload and delay your fatigue. At any point, you have to think that engaging the autopilot, you can relax. No. This is absolutely something that has to be clear, crystal clear. Autopilot is not another pilot. You're still a pilot.
Before moving on, I think it's better to make it two-way. So let's ask some questions. There are some questions asked.
Oh, please.
Because it's much better to have interaction with you.
Sure, absolutely.
Than having you, every time explain. So we have one question, actually, a couple of questions. One question is from Berkayhan. He asked, how's the company, especially Ryanair's, approach to the flight time limitation regulations, which regulates the flight crew's duty time and off time? I think this is an effect of human factor too, sir. And what do you think about it?
Flight time limitations are written in stone. All the companies are really keen of abiding by those rules. Although they might seem complicated, the airlines especially are absolutely, I would say, religious on that. It is very, very important. And I have never had, in my recent experience, any case in which they clearly broken the rule about flight time limitation. And but that doesn't mean that if you are this is very important, because flight time limitation are rules and they are designed to try to protect you from fatigue and stress. But that doesn't mean that complying with flight time limitation is enough for you to fully perform. Okay, so the company they have a special software that they will calculate the time, the flight time period, okay, your duty time and your rest period and stuff. But complying with them doesn't mean that you're safe from fatigue. It's very important. It's still on you to understand if you have managed to properly rest. And it's still up to you to protect yourself from external factor to affect you. So if you have stress factors, you have to realize that any stress factor that you might realize and recognize around you will affect your rest period. So it's you, the ultimate decider about this.
Okay. Oh, okay. So that means that the crew member or the pilot can withdraw if they feel like they cannot function in the process of the operation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do have one question actually. How much sleep is recommended? Like, is it the usual 8 hours sleep, or can the body like learn to function in a less amount of sleep, or how do you regulate the sleep amount?
Okay, so about this, I have written a few articles for a magazine a few years ago. So our body is based on what they call circadian rhythm. Okay, circadian from the Latin means around the day. So we are designed as a human being. We haven't changed our way of functioning since the prehistoric era. All right, era. So we still function as a caveman. So we function so that there is a certain amount of time you have to sleep. The 8-hour rule is a very good reference about this. Okay, but anybody can relate when I say that sometimes 8 hours is not enough. Sometimes is even too much. So as a you have to take that as a reference, because if you disrupt your rhythm of awakening and sleep, you find out quickly that if you, for example, if I realize myself, right? So if I'm on holidays, okay, I don't have to work, my circadian rhythm, personal circadian rhythm, wants that I go to bed at 3 a.m. and I wake up at 11 a.m. This is me, okay? I've learned it with time. So my person tends to that. Now, when I work, unfortunately, I have to adjust to the work schedule. I have no other choice. So I realized that I sleep the same 8 hours, but I go to bed 8 p.m. And if I wake up at 4 a.m., it doesn't work. I wake up super tired. Okay. Meaning that my body has a certain rhythm, which if I disrupt, probably of these 8 hours which I slept, I probably can make 3. Now, can I do anything about this? Yes and no. Because if my report time is 5 a.m., I still have to wake up at least 3:30 a.m. So there is no way I can escape that. So I have to know it the day before, making sure that before my sleep, which I know is not going to have the same quality, although I will sleep 8 hours, it's not going to have the same quality, is up to me to make sure that I can relax a few hours before going to sleep. I don't drink any coffee. I don't make any physical activity that boosts my metabolism before going to bed and so on. So I can give you references on this because I'm really interested in this. I have there is a few scientists on YouTube that they have very good explanation, much more in detail, that they have to do with melatonin and the amount of light that your body is exposed to, and that regulates your day and night sleep. But not to get in detail, because I'm not an expert, I'm just amateur about this, is it comes with experience, but it's really up to you to understand that if the day before, if, for example, I have a duty tomorrow, okay, at 3 a.m., say, at 4 a.m., the day before, I know I'm not going to have a good quality sleep. I don't have to stress myself, and I have to make sure that all the stress factors are dealt with. Because if, for example, I have a financial problem, or I was sick, or I had any other problem, I know that it's going to affect my sleep even more. Okay, so it comes with experience, but all these stressor effects might be trained. You can be trained to understand yourself. But unfortunately, there is no, again, magic formula. And I absolutely advocate against supplements or things that you can drink or take as a pills. I really advocate against. I have colleagues who, for example, had taken melatonin in supplements and stuff. But if you're not under the vigilance of a doctor, you might end up worsening your situation much more.
Okay. We have one question, and we can go back to the presentation. It's from Berkayhan again. In the past, there were few of the accidents which caused improper surveillance of the air traffic. How is the surveillance improved in terms of flight safety, especially? And how can the air traffic flow be managed in the congested airports?
Well, I'm not obviously, I haven't worked in ATC, but I've been in their training simulator. So from my perspective and from the point of view of ATC training, they manage their stress and making sure, similarly to us, that they are at least two people constantly looking at the same sector, and they can integrate their skills each other. Okay, so for example, if one is managing, for example, the approach traffic into London, okay, say in a certain sector, there is always a person who looks at the specific traffic in that specific moment, and there is another person who's actually able to understand what's going to happen in the near future. So he's looking at the other sectors that affect. Okay, so what happens is that they try to have a bigger picture on what's going to happen. They couldn't cope with the situation at the spot. They have to have an idea on what the traffic will look like and to make a plan for it. Okay, so this is the way they cope with it. The way to coping with stress is slightly different, because they don't have to cope. If you think about the Shell model, they don't have to deal with, uncomfortable seat. They don't have to deal with weather. They don't have to deal with all the other things that we need to deal when we are in the air. So they cope with the stress completely different. They try to work less hours, more concentrated, in couple or even more people, and rotate themselves to abstract their view, so that when they come back to their position and they have to manage certain traffic, they have a fresh mind. For them, the problem is the overwhelming situation of the traffic. For us, is another way of stress, another more pressing environment stress. They don't have that. The way that they manage, to be honest, is something that I always, to my ATC friends, I always tell them that I will never do their job, because for me it's too much of a stress. And when the situation is I'm used that when the situation is a little bit under, outside of my control, I take control. This is what we say as a pilot, my control. You take control of the situation, and that's when you act. Them, no, because they don't have the possibility to revert on manual, right? If they tell to an aircraft, turn right 20 degrees, and the aircraft doesn't do that, they cannot do anything. So I always tell them that their job, I will never be able to do that.
Okay, this is actually really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry for interrupting your presentation, but
No, no,
it's better to
absolutely.
have an interactive
Absolutely, I
meeting
prefer.
than having it just one side. So we can continue with the presentation. We have other questions too, but we can have them in the way, maybe at the middle or maybe at the end. No problem. So I'll pass it back to you, sir, and with the presentation.
Perfect. Let me see now. The maintenance. I wanted to include, I always like to include maintenance and ATC in my discourse because I really, I'm really interested in showing a picture which includes a much wider situation panorama, so to speak, when it comes to aviation. So maintenance engineers, as we call them, and they are our heroes, they also work in shift, and they also have very strict procedures. Okay, they are responsible to make sure that all the procedures put in place are correct, because we fully trust them. When I sit on the plane, if the defect is signed off, I fully trust them, fully. I don't have any other choice. Okay, so they have also a specific training when it comes to fatigue. Their role is behind the scenes, but absolutely crucial. So as much as we and the ATC, they also have to undergo this specific training and awareness. So when I say it's important to perform correct in a duty day, I always think about a normal standard day. But when it comes to specific emergency situation, well, that's really when your performance has to be at the 100%. So this is why you train, because every day you might expect a situation of emergency. Situation of emergency puts you in a stress itself, so is another stress factor. Also, they divide the stress that we experience in emergency in dynamic stress, in a static, so to speak, stress, and then in startle effect, which is when something happened, you didn't expect that to happen, so your first reaction doesn't come from the conscious part of our brain. It comes from what is in your cortex of the brain. So it's something that it comes from real deep inside your being. Okay, so your awareness and continuous training should give you the skill to respond on an emergency situation basically out of instinct. So you have to highly train yourself when in the emergency response, and you train yourself to expect the unexpected. Now, I don't know if this makes sense. What I want to say is that if you are ready, if you come to work rested, with your training complete, with your high hydration complete, so to speak. So all the checklists which we used to say ticked. That's when you're able to respond on an emergency in the best possible way. There was a colleague a few years ago that said that he experienced an airspeed indication disagree between the two altimeters in the cockpit, and he was unable to spell 6,500. He wasn't able to formulate the number. He couldn't understand what he was reading, and he couldn't spell it. Okay. Now, would you tell me that maybe he was unable to understand 6,500? No. That was because, and then he admitted that his performance was lower because he wasn't ready to cope with the emergency situation, because he wasn't ready in the first place. So you get to experience a certain amount of an ability to answer and to respond, which you cannot even imagine. This happens when you have an event that happens straight away, or even in a normal day when the day passes by. When we do 4 flights, on my 4th flight, I always make sure that I read the checklist much slower. For example, okay? I know that I don't want anybody to put more stress on me than I should have. And I make sure that I take my time. Because even though we fly so fast, even though we have to deal with this infinity of factors, we have to take our time, especially knowing that your performance during the day decreases. So this is it. Okay, here is where you can find some of the references, all the books I've been going through, everything which I've been, trying to talk is something that I was trying to get the best information in order to be able to be more knowledgeable. But then anything you want, you can let me know. I have a much bigger references and index. And so this is it for the presentation. I hope that now we can have a much more free conversation, and we can jump into the topics. I just wanted to add, and this I can already, so here I am again. So I just bear with me just 5 minutes more, because I promised a little bit more insight in the training, in the pilot training. Okay, so as an instructor, I would like to share a few things that I think they are very important when it comes to training, and which you have to look when you're not operating a flight, for example, on a 737, but you're about to undergo your maybe first solo or your flight lesson. Okay, so in training, the human factor is slightly different. Okay, there you have to cope with the fact that you have to learn, you have to perform in an environment which is completely different from what you used to learn. When normally, as we are now, we are trying to learn in a class with a certain temperature, with a certain situation, with not much of a noise and stuff. Learning in an aircraft is a completely different deal. And you have to deal with tunnel vision, high temperature, low temperature, wind, noise, your equipment, your gear, meaning that if you have a proper, for example, headset, if you're comfortable, which you are not, because remember what I said at the beginning, in the small airplane, when you start flying, you are not comfortable. I can guarantee is uncomfortable by definition, okay? So you have to prepare yourself not only to sleep enough, not only to make sure you're hydrated, but you are focused on learning in an environment completely unfriendly. Okay. Not only you have to deal with your instructor. Okay. So as instructors, normally we try to be nice people, but not everybody is nice. Not everybody understands. Okay. So it's very important to have a certain relationship, so to speak, with the other person. So for that, as usual, when you deal with another person, there is a certain importance on the grooming. So you have to make sure you look like somebody who take their duties seriously. Okay, it's not only you preparing your lesson, but you have to look like somebody that takes things seriously. That's very important. This is also why they like us to have uniform, because you have to look like somebody who have prepared in every aspect to be there. Actually, in my very personal opinion, being able to take a flight lesson and then become a pilot is a huge privilege. Only 0.000% of people are able to make an airplane fly. So we are privileged people who have to acknowledge their privilege, even presenting yourself to the others, and in this case to the instructor. Also making sure that the roles between the student and the instructor are very clear. Even when, for example, I had students, actually many Turkish students, which I'm very, very friend with. But then when we came to the day of the training, of the flight, we had to have our roles very clear. Okay. I like that people call me Claudio, no sir, no captain, no nothing. But at least, have some respect. I like people to call me with my given name. That's fine. But it doesn't mean that then I allow you anything else in flight. The same for the instructor. The instructor should never touch, because I have instructor who, they slap your hand. No, it's very important. Okay, because when I'm upstairs in the air trying to teach and you trying to understand, it's very important that the environment between the two people involved is very clear. Okay, and then obviously when it comes to training, it's very important that from the side of the instructor there are specific, very clear objective of the lesson. So I'm saying, Kaula, look, today we're learning, for example, to fly our full flap approach, for example. Okay, by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to do this, and that. I make sure you make, and then at the end of the lesson, when we go through the objective that was fixed at the beginning, you can say, okay, in the 5 items which we tried to learn, I was good in 4 of them, I have to improve in 1. Fair enough. Lesson complete. So you know where to work in, where to put your effort. Okay. So I have to be clear in the debriefing, and this applies for students, but also applies for the airline operation. The other day I was in London, and I was in my, what was that, 3 weeks ago. I did my simulator session in which we practice extreme situations, and we have to decide. So we practiced a ditching. So the airplane was completely depressurized. We ended up in the sea for practice, obviously, in the sea. It was nice. And then so the examiner, when we finished, he made sure that he was talking to the captain and said, look, when you take a decision, and you are in the cockpit, the person with more experience, you have to make sure you ask the less experienced person first when you take a decision. So, for example, shall we take this much of fuel? Captain asks the first officer, how much fuel do you think we should get? Instead of asking, are you okay with 12 tons? First officer, yeah, of course. So it's a completely different way of asking the same question. How much fuel do you think we should get? He says, 11.5. Captain says, well, I checked the weather in the alternate. Maybe we should take half a ton more. Do you agree? Okay, I agree. That's a completely different way of asking the same question, but to get the other person involved. Okay. So this was a little bit of an example of the emphasis in training. Okay. So if you're more curious about more stuff in training, I'm more than happy to answer.
Okay, so you said very amazing thing. Everyone is nice, but not everyone understands. So you should take care of yourself with respect. This is a really nice quote that you said. I would like to share with everybody also. So thank you very much. So we will continue with the questions so that we can have much more of the other side to the audience too. So there is one question. I think it's about the relationship between automation and human factors. For that question, it's from Abdurrahman. If I'm not correct, please correct me in the comment section, in the message, of course. So it's not. I think he's asking. So it's not about the automation does not kill the pilot's job, but it's helping to improve the job, right?
Absolutely. So the purpose of the automation from the very beginning is to, okay, let's put it this way. Humans, we don't know how to fly. We are not designed to fly. Flying is a damn difficult thing to do. Okay. I'm also going to say that part of the flying still escapes a little our full knowledge. Okay. Meaning that our effort, or as we call brain capacity, in order to make an airplane fly safely, would take roughly 60% of our brain in order to get the plane flying straight and level towards a certain navigation point, towards a certain destination. Now, if I would have to keep my brain occupied 60% of the time for the 100% of the time of the operation, I would probably be exhausted by half of the first flight. Okay, so the automation first and only for the moment scope is to release the pilot from all these duty and task in order to keep the airplane flying, so he can concentrate on managing the flight, which per se is also which is something that the automation cannot still fully do by themselves. Or better said, the automation could fly the airplane from A to B. But as per now, in the commercial airline operation, it's not considered fully safe to make only the autopilot flying. So the automation is there to relieve the pilot for all the duty that can be made by a machine much better, much more efficiently, releasing him and freeing his brain in order to be able to prevent emergency and to deal with it when it comes. Basically, this is what it is. So it's like your car is able to keep the road straight. So then you are released from keeping the wheel, you are released, so you can think about the traffic or thinking about everything that can happen, and many things can happen. So this is the sole purpose of automation at the moment.
Okay, that's really a very interesting thing. So we have another question from Luna. What designers do to lessen the stress on pilots in cockpits and such? Assuming, let's say, they are claustrophobic pilot, what's the process with this case, if there is any?
There is not. So I have known few of my students, they are afraid to fly. Okay. The aeroplane designers don't take in account any of that. Very modern aircrafts have a very decent comfort in the flight deck. Okay, when especially the very big airplanes that they fly very long intercontinental flights, the comfort is somehow taken in much better account than before. But to make you an example, okay, the airplane I fly, the 737 and the 77 MAX, they still share the same design since 1970, and the way we keep our seat comfortable is still through the same material made out of wool that is been 50 years ago. Okay, so the comfort in 90% of the aircraft out there is not taken into account and is still the same as it was on the war airplanes back in the 70s. So no, if you're claustrophobic, there are, or if you are afraid to fly, like some students of mine, my suggestion is always as follows. The fear of flying or the claustrophobic sensation is normally due to two factors, according to my experience. I'm no doctor, right? But according to my experience, there are two factors. You have people who are afraid to fly or are claustrophobic because they are not in control of the situation. I have a very, very good friend of mine. He just made it. Now he's starting his pilot career now. He was afraid to fly. So he stepped on a plane the first day and he was scared to fly. But the moment in which the instructor understood the situation and put him in full control with a yoke in his hand, able to actually, fly around, that's when he started to improve. And now he's not afraid to fly anymore because his fear was due to the fact that he wasn't in control. Okay. And then you have the other reason. Normally, the other reason is due to the fact that you are the space is so close that you don't see the way out. And for that, possibly you have to work it with some professional, some doctor or some psychologist, because that sensation never disappears. Okay, that never go away. So that's something that if you want to become a pilot and you have that, it's not that it's impossible to become a pilot, but you have to deal with it before you go to fly.
Okay. Thank you very much. One of the questions, actually, I had a question from the beginning, the impact of human factor in the cockpit design. So you've said that the design of the cockpits and the maintenance, the whole design is not based on comfort, but based on safety. So that means the whole industry prioritizes safety than comfort.
I want to say that the aviation has made a huge improvement in that sense. Mm-hmm. But what I want to say is that when an engineer or a designer has to decide between making the cockpit more comfortable or saving space and weight, they will possibly always go for the second one. It's not the environment, it is uncomfortable, no doubt. Obviously, you sit there, right? So you sit there, and the seat is comfortable in the sense that you can accommodate and you can regulate many parts of the seat and stuff, but it will never become a place in which you're comfortable in the full sense. So you sit there and you can perform your duty, but you will still have, for example, in order for you to have a better situation awareness when you land, you should always sit slightly above the glare shield, okay, at a certain angle, 15 degrees, okay? So this is the angle between the glare shield and your line of sight. I don't know if it makes sense from what you can see. Yeah. Okay, so there is a certain angle. That angle is impaired by simply the wind wiper, okay? So that component, even though it's there and it will disturb you, it will never be removed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
While if you modern cars, they've tried to find all the possible things in order to make the car more comfortable. In the airplane, it's not the same. If there is a certain element, a certain component that makes your sight less clear, you have to cope with it.
Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, so we do have one question from Alperen. He said, what qualities do you think aviation recruiters will look for in new people due to the development of aviation in automation?
Nice. Okay, so according to my experience in training, in the sense that I've met many people who then made it to the airline, I tried to somehow make an idea on which kind of person have had less problems to get a job. Okay, so I tried to ask myself, what do these people have in common? All the successful students of mine, what did they have in common when it comes to get a job as an airline pilot? Okay, so a good pilot has to understand his own limits, okay? Has to understand that the machine is very complex, and again, the machine is not fully adapted to you, okay? For example, I have an example for this. As you can imagine, when you climb above the clouds, there is nothing that protects you from the sun, correct? So it's like always fully sunny day up there, correct?
Yeah.
There is no, at least in the majority of the commercial 737, they haven't, no, let's say some of them they have, but let's say in the majority of the cases, there is no sun shield which can cover the full window for us to be comfortable. We stay the whole day with the full sun in our face. So you have, next time I will bring a picture of a captain who made, basically he had to cover the full window with paper because we have no way to protect ourselves for this fully sunny, exposure to the sun. Some aircraft, I'm told that the 787, don't quote me on this, but the 787, they have a certain system that you can activate and it will somehow get the window a little bit sun protected. But in general, there is no protection. Okay? And it's up to you to protect yourself with glasses, with everything in order to screen yourself from the sun. So a good pilot knows that and adapts in that sense. So he adapts to the duty. So he knows that sometimes he has to wake up at 3 in the morning, and that's the way it is. Nobody will ever escape from that. First. Second, he adapts inside the cockpit. Third of all, knows and understands that automation shall never substitute the pilot. Automation is just a little help to release a little bit of his brain power, but nothing else. Most of the time it happens. Most of the time in the approach we have the autopilot doesn't behave correctly, and we say my control, and you control the plane, you fly the plane. Still nowadays, okay, everybody talks about automation, artificial intelligence, but still we land the plane ourselves.
Yeah. Okay, that's really amazing information. So one of our last questions will be from Berkayan again. So he says that, sir, we know that there are a lot of methods to keep the situational awareness at best, for example, such as SLAM method, etc. So pilots undergo to the emergency tests in the simulator, but in Berkay's opinion, in reality, there still might be a lot of risks, again, a situational awareness loss. So how do pilots keep their situational awareness at the best, like their peak?
So the situational awareness depends hugely on your own fitness that day. So again, if you slept correctly, if you eat correctly, if you drink the water correctly, your situational awareness improves. Then there is the knowledge. For example, the other day I was operating out of Barcelona. Barcelona is one of the biggest airports I've ever been. And there are, I don't know, tens of taxiways. And so on the ground, situational awareness was really impaired. So what I spent the full day before trying to figure out which way I could have gotten from the stand to the runway. So all the possible taxiway. Okay, so I had an idea. I come to the briefing the day after, knowing that would be my problem, to have my situational awareness high on the ground. So I spoke with the captain, specialist at captain. I think we have this threat. Okay, the taxi. Which taxi can I expect? He was telling me, if we get this runway, this was going to be. So I built my situational awareness through knowledge. In the cockpit, then I kept absolute silence in the cockpit during taxiing, okay? Because we both knew that was a threat. In order to avoid the threat, we fully concentrated. One fully concentrated in taxi the plane, me fully concentrated in listen to the ATC and follow my taxi chart. This is an fresh example on how I built my situational awareness there. In an airport I've never been, in one of the busiest time of the day, and with all possible disruption you can imagine. The radio continuously talking blah, 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 all the time, because it's so trafficked. So this is how I built my own. And that day I made sure I was really rested. You know what I mean? Also, again, comfort. So I was there making sure that the volume of my headset is correct, not too high, not too low. I was sitting correctly. I had my vision correct. I had sunglasses to protect myself. If I didn't have I knew my situational awareness would be impaired.
Okay, that's one of the interesting other experiences you shared with us today. So to end our session, I think we've come to the end. One of the last things that I wanted to ask is, you're an instructor, you have students, and we here, all of us are students. So For example, there are qualities that we should follow to enter the industry, like time and stress management, adaptability, teamwork, individual work, situational awareness, responsibility, or like the respect we have for others and for ourselves too. What kind of between these characteristics, which characteristics do you think are the best, and which one should we follow right now so that it can be best for us in our future or in the career in aviation?
So you want to know which are in which you would like to you need to concentrate in order to undergo a better training. This is the
Exactly.
question.
Exactly.
So again, training and operating they are two different duties, but equally important. Okay, so during training, I'm going to say that during training you are less guided, okay, and because you are less experienced as well, it's very important to take your job seriously enough to understand that even training is a job. But the flight time limitation, your own personal limitation, your knowledge is normally lower because you're a student. So your level of attention and awareness has to be higher than a professional pilot, in the sense that your limits are still unknown to yourself as well. Okay, so my idea is when you start, you have to have a relationship, so to speak, or the ability to talk with your instructor, okay, and have them assessing and helping you managing your day by day, because it might not look so, but the day by day of a student pilot, it has to be closely managed by if you are somebody very experienced in life and in aviation and you are doing a pilot course after a lot of experience, that's another thing, because then it's up to you to allocate time and effort and resources. But if you're a young student, like I think most of you, it's very important to have advice, especially from your instructor in this sense. So you have to concentrate absolutely to prepare the flight much earlier than the flight really happens. Okay, so anticipation is absolutely the key. Okay, then you will see that you have a plan. Things go by the plan normally 50% of the time, okay? And then you learn from your mistakes. Nobody expects you to know everything or to never make mistakes or because the misevaluation about threats is typical, okay? And the focus and the attention on being the day of the flight fully prepared and fully rested. I always ask my students, have you slept well? Did you eat correctly? Okay, because it happens sometimes that they say, okay, no, look, real cases is like when we have a flight lesson very early morning, I know that students tend not to eat, for example. And that's something that I know because the student performs very well the very first 20 minutes. And then the performance drop massively, tremendously. Okay. So this is something I know. They normally don't. Okay. So sometimes it happens that I bring with me, for example, some cereal bars or some chocolate, and you will see absolutely the difference. So they have a little piece of chocolate and they now become maverick pilots. Okay, so this is because they didn't assess their own performance before. Okay, so anticipation, planning, threat and error management. Ultimately, once again, super important. So look, I don't. I came to the briefing as I normally. You show up an hour before the flight for the briefing. You show them. You show up an hour before the flight and you say, "Look, Claudio, I cannot fly today because I didn't sleep correctly." Oh, good to you. This comes with experience, but again, have that in your mind. You always have to assess yourself in the full period, but especially, before getting to the actual flight, to the day, because that's already too late. When you start flying and you have problems, that's already too late.
Okay.
This important. This comes before the knowledge. Okay, skills, aviation skills, and flying an airplane is something that you can learn through teaching, through learning in the school. But the ability to have your mind focused and assess yourself is something that we cannot teach. Okay.
Correct. It's very informative. Thank you very much. Again, I don't think we have any more questions. And so I would like to thank you again for the amazing presentation. You've shared very informative experiences, very good stories, and
Thank
also
you.
very nice quotes also. Thank you very much. So we will have future events, and we would like to see you all in the future events too. And thank you very
Absolutely.
much again. So I think they don't have any questions after that. So this will be our closing. So thank you, sir,
Thank you.
again, and
Thank you.
see you in the future events that we're going to have as a club. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Bye.